In this episode, I am talking to Nicole Syphers. Nicole is an EP at Central Coast Physiolates. I have been working with Nicole, amongst others, at Physiolates for 3 years now. When I first met Nicole and the others there, I was 30 kilos heavier than I am now and right on the precipice of needing to go into a wheelchair. They've given me the tools necessary to combat my neuromuscular degeneration and stay up on my feet to this day. This interview hopefully is a chance for you to see the importance of having an EP. And if you are not in a position to see an EP, I hope the information Nicole and I discussed in this video is helpful for you on your journey. Could you give the viewers and I a brief description of what an exercise physiologist does?
Sure. So an exercise physiologist, or EP as we're usually shortened to, helps people to achieve health or movement outcomes by using exercise, almost like exercise is a medicine. So we will help you figure out what type, how much, the dosage or intensity, and how often you should be exercising to give you the best outcomes that you're looking for. We usually work in conjunction with a whole team of people, including GPs, physios, OTs, speech therapists, and sometimes psychologists as well. The difference, I guess, a lot of people ask the difference between a physio and an EP, which is a bit tricky because there's a lot of overlap. Physios tend to do a bit more of the hands-on type work, whereas exercise physiologists tend to do a little bit more of the hands-off type work. And physios generally are more involved in the acute stage, and that's not always true because every physio or EP will have their own different set of experience. But the EPs generally tend to get a little bit more involved in the chronic side, so when things have been going for a little bit longer.
Okay. What drew you to exercise physiology?
That's a bit of a question. When I was in school, I actually really liked economics and I really liked doing health studies. And I had to make a decision between the two. I got talked into doing business. So I actually did a business degree first.
Oh, really?
And became an accountant. Yeah. So I worked in one of the big accounting firms. And it just wasn't really satisfying. The money was good, but it wasn't satisfying for me as a person. So I went back to uni and I did study, and originally I thought, I'm going to work with elite athletes, I really want to work on performance. And after a while I sort of thought, you know what, that's kind of not really making me feel that great. I'm helping someone achieve something that, yes, it's fantastic when they do it, and yes, it lifts a lot of morale and spirits, and particularly as the Olympics is on at present, that's a big thing for us. But it's not really making that big a difference to someone's life. Whereas if I work on more of the rehabilitation side of things, then you can make huge differences to someone's life just from a few simple interventions, because you've got that knowledge to be able to help people to do things that they couldn't do previously. So that gives me a lot of reward internally, which is probably what drew me there.
Okay, cool. What is your previous experience working with neuromuscular degeneration?
I was drawn to neuro while I was still at uni. So I actually did my honours thesis working with people who had spinal cord injuries. And at the time, they were starting to make some inroads into using electrodes to help people to be able to get their muscles working in their legs so that they could actually walk. But the issues were that their cardiovascular systems weren't attuned to that. And so we were actually looking at what was going to happen when they stood up. Were they going to faint because they ended up with slow movement through their legs because they didn't have the muscle pump working to pump the blood back up into their brains again? So that sort of drew me into working with neuro, and I got a little bit intrigued by it all. But since then, I've also worked with people with peripheral neuropathy, fibromyalgia, POTS, post-polio syndrome, cerebral palsy, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, ataxias, and a whole heap of neurological conditions. And it's an area that I really do enjoy. And each client presents very differently, even if they have the same diagnosis. And that's, for me, gives me a bit of a professional challenge, which I enjoy. But I also feel like I can make a bit of a difference and I can help people in that field.
Yeah. Why is exercise physiology important in combating neuromuscular degeneration?
I think the nerves are like the control center for muscles. So when either the input messages via the nerves back to the muscles, or the output to get the muscle to actually activate don't flow through correctly, then the muscles won't work as well as they can. And this can have an impact in terms of movement patterns, in terms of timing and coordination of your movement, which obviously is going to affect your efficiency and your fatigue levels. It can also cause issues with spatial awareness and balance. And all of those things are to do with our, I guess, the muscles that we can consciously control, but we also have muscles that we subconsciously control, like our smooth muscle. And a good example of that is the muscles that control our bladder and our bowel. So we can actually, neurological conditions can actually have an impact on that as well, which is something that a lot of people are unaware of, particularly in the early stages of degenerative conditions. I've done a lot of training in women's health as well. So I actually have a little bit of experience in terms of being able to assist alongside of the pelvic health physios, being able to assist with those conditions. So I guess, how does exercise deal with that? It can help to target and retrain some of the movement patterning. It can also help to retrain some strength so that you don't fatigue quite as quickly. And by doing that, that can actually help you to slow the decline, because you don't get as fatigued, and therefore you're able to maintain a better technique for longer when you are doing movements. There may come a time with degenerative neuromuscular conditions where, you know, the movements that you used to be able to do are not something that's actually really very achievable anymore. And at that point in time, we can also help with modifying so that you can still achieve those tasks, but just in a different way. I think another angle on how exercise can help, apart from that directly targeting the issues that are presenting as a result of the neurological condition, is that when movement gets hard and fatigue starts to ramp up, people tend to move less. And when you move less, you start to decondition, and that compounds the issues that you have because of the neurological condition. So the more active you're able to be, particularly early on, and actually keep your condition, the better off you're going to be longer down. So it's almost like it slows the decline down a little bit in a lot of cases. And I guess finally, another way that exercise can help, and this is something probably that in our clinic we do a bit different to a lot of other physio and exercise physiology clinics, is that we work a lot on breathing and core function and maintaining good posture throughout a movement, because your postural changes really do feed into the deconditioning cycle and can also contribute to continence issues. So we stay very on top of that, and we work really hard to make sure that those things are addressed, in addition to just getting your strength and your balance and your coordination and your aerobic conditioning happening too.
And what do you think is the reason Physiolates has that unique perspective? What contributes to that?
I think part of that is actually probably driven through, partly we started off with a lot of Pilates-based exercises, and a lot of those are based on postural type movements, but then we've taken it further and looked more in detail with it. And I think what drove us into the area that we are in now and how we do treat people a little bit differently is probably the women's health angle. So we're doing a lot of pelvic floor work, working pregnancy, postpartum, with women as they were going through menopause. And we also had a couple of neurological clients who I was seeing at the time who were having some continence issues. And we started to sort of look at it and say, well, hang on. Yes, some of that is because of the neurological condition, but some of that also is just because the posture that you're holding is not ideal, and that's contributing to making the continence issues worse. And so that kind of drove us along that pathway to looking at what happens. So when we look at pelvic floor, we also look at our diaphragm, which is our breathing muscles, and we look at our core muscles through our trunk. So getting all of those things being able to work together to give you a stable base so you can then move your arms and legs is sort of where we, I guess, differentiate a little bit from perhaps what you might get in other clinics where they focus more on let's get gross motor, let's get lots of energy being burnt, let's build as much strength as we can. We like to build from the inside and get the core and the breath and the pelvic floor working well, and then we use that as our base of support to then get the rest of the body working.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because from personal experience, that's definitely helped me. Because I was, quite active before I started with you guys, but it wasn't getting me the results I needed because there was no proper form with any of it. Like that first appointment was such a shock. Like when you guys were talking about having my sit bones behind me and just it's surprising it's not. When Tara first told me that you guys are kind of unique with that, it was surprising because from personal experience, it's so, because I had EPs before you guys and we just focused on, toe taps and squats and the same movements, but none of that focus on breath or anything.
Yeah.
And it's
that does make such a big difference.
Yeah, so crucial.
And especially not telling tales out of school, but when Roots first started, even just him talking for a period of time was difficult. And now that he has a better core stability and he's got better breath control, I don't think I've heard him out of breath in some time, apart from we've done something like riding a bike, for a period of time. Anybody will be out of breath. I am out of breath with that. So it does make a really big difference.
100%. What are some quick tips for people with neuromuscular disorders to consider to assist in combating their degeneration?
There's a couple of things that I would say. Number one is, even if you are well now, consult an EP, a physio or an OT who has training in pelvic floor, in breath, in core support, in addition to neurological conditions. And this will help you set yourself up for good movement strategies early on in the piece, and build strength from the inside to the outside. So you've got a good base to work off. I always remember one of my multiple sclerosis clients, and she said to me, for the first 10 years of the disease, I just ignored it and said, this is not happening. It just, and she says, I wish that I had have paid attention and done some rehab early on in the piece, because then I wouldn't be in as bad a condition as I am now.
There was a paper recently saying the earlier the rehab and treatment comes in, the better the outcome. And that's obvious, but they have now done these studies in ataxias with people who are right from when they're diagnosed as children, and then followed them through for years and years now. And it's crazy the effect it has, the early rehab.
Yeah, well, we definitely see that across the board with other conditions as well. The NDIS in Australia is actually even recognizing that with kids now, and they're giving kids early access right from a young age. So kids under 7 don't even have to have a diagnosis now. They actually will will assist children to achieve their potential, because they know the earlier that you get in touch and get some support around what's happening, even if they're kind of vague symptoms at that stage, the less difficulties you're going to have later on down the pathway. And for the NDIS, that's a bit of a financial decision, I guess, but it also pays benefits for the person who's involved in it from the other side, from the patient perspective as well, because then they actually do have less disability, and they can,
So it's like investing. It might not be great in the short term, but financially for the NDIS, investing in early rehab is long-term good for them as well, because less mobility aids and all of that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. And having said that, there's obviously going to be people who are just embarking on this journey and who are like my MS client, who, have ignored their condition for a long period of time and haven't done the early work. It's not too late. There's still plenty that you can do at this stage. Some movement is better than none, but learn about pacing if fatigue's a big issue for you. But the better condition you can be in now, obviously, the better you're going to be later on. I know when I was doing my honours thesis in the same space that I was using in the university, they were doing some stroke rehab studies. And traditionally, they used to say that, once you were at that 12-month rehab point, there wasn't going to be any further neural plasticity, and that you weren't going to be getting any better after 12 months. They were still achieving gains at 2, 3, 5 years down the track.
Wow.
So there is a lot of research going on now about neuroplasticity and how we actually generate better patterns for movement, how we actually generate new brain wiring connections. And that sort of research is only going to make things better in the long run for people who do have neurodegenerative conditions, because we're learning more about the best ways to repattern the way that we're doing things.
Yeah. I think to add to the quick tips, I was thinking, even if someone can't access an EP or anything like that, the breath work for me has been, even it's so simple and straightforward, but just moving with your breath, will aid in everything, and using the out breath, because you can probably explain it better than me, but the stacking that happens with the out breath and bring the diaphragm down and all that.
So essentially, I guess if you imagine that your core is a cylinder, so your rib cage stacks directly over the top of your pelvis and you form a nice cylinder. Your aim is to be able to keep that cylinder. It doesn't have to be still all of the time, but your aim is, when you're going to move your arms and legs and you need that stability, is that you can keep that stable. So when our diaphragm, which is our breathing muscle, actually starts to drop down, our pelvic floor relaxes. And at that point, we're actually using intra-abdominal pressure a little bit to help us to manage our coordination through our trunk and our stability through our trunk. But when we breathe out, the diaphragm lifts back up, the pelvic floor starts to lift, and we engage through the core muscles through your trunk. And that actually gives you your stability then, that your back is stable, your trunk is stable, that you then have something that you can move your arms and legs off. So getting your breath to work well is important. It is tricky. And not a lot of physios or EPs, fortunately, have done a lot of work on rib work, but that's what you need to look for if you are looking for someone who can help you, because the positioning of your ribs and the tilt of your pelvis are both going to have a big impact on how well you can breathe and how well your pelvic floor and your core muscles are going to work to support you in your movement.
Yeah. It's anterior pelvic tilt, is that the pelvic thing?
There's anterior posterior pelvic tilt. So essentially you want to find a neutral through your pelvis. So you want to make sure that you have your, the bones at the front of your pelvis in line with your pubic bone. So if you were to go across the two bones right at the front of your pelvis, on the back of my knuckle here, should be in line with your pubic bone, your little triangle bone here. So they don't want to be forwards here. They don't want to be backwards here. You want them to be in line on a parallel.
And there's actually a surprising amount of information out there, like YouTube tutorials and things like that, to address those things with just normal exercise and stuff. Because yeah, I found that helpful. But yeah.
Perfect.
So just finally, so you're at Physiolates Holgate, Central Coast.
Yep, so it's called Central Coast Physiolates. We're based at Holgate on the Central Coast. It's a really lovely rural place to work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, so the physios and EPs there, we all love what we do and we all really like helping people. We do have sessions, you know, if you are in a rural or remote area, COVID has sort of forced our hand a little bit more than what we may have otherwise done, because we tend to be quite hands-on to help to position everything correctly for people. But COVID sort of forced our hand a little bit to learn how to do that via video. So that's been a really interesting journey. So if you are looking for someone who can help you along that journey a little bit, and you don't have access physically to go and see someone, video consults are also an option.
Cool.
Yeah.
And wicked. Thanks for doing this, Nicole. It's been great.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. And if there's more people that we can help, we're really happy to make that happen.
See you, Nicole.
Right.